We live in a world heavily influenced by information. By trustworthy information, by information that you trust, by fake news. Anyhow, it is heavily influenced by information. And I thought we have journalists to get trustworthy information. Do we? Is that the role of journalists? Will that be replaced by AI? Exactly for that reason, I'm very happy to have Bart Brouwers here, a journalist yourself, formerly also editor-in-chief, so he knows what we should think about journalists, and a professor in journalism. And that's possibly a somewhat different look into what we can expect from journalists. But very welcome to have you here.
Thank you.
But you make yourself obsolete, so...
Well, not immediately maybe, but yeah, part of our job will be, well, replaced by technology on one condition, and that is that technology does a better job than we do as humans, because that is always, of course, the bottom line.
We also know you as an innovator, so instead of then leaning back or fighting back and keeping the role of the journalisms as the gold standard for getting the news on air or in print, you took a step forward.
Yeah.
You have your own platform to create news?
Yeah, it's true.
Even when I say create news?
Yeah, create news. Well, of course, you can interpret creation of news in different ways, but the creation of news is the establishment of things happening without anybody noticing towards things visible. So that's part of the main job of a journalist, creating news from facts or happenings or whatever.
But you gave a wonderful definition of what journalists do. To take information, things that are already there, that everyone could see but that people do not really see, and elevate that to news.
Well, it's also that not everybody can see it, because it's like, well, a famous old Dutch journal said, lifting tiles and seeing what's beneath the tile. So you have to uncover what is covered. That can be politics, that can be a big company that is hiding things or whatever. So it's not always in plain sight, but the journalist has to find it out,
There was a time in the 80s that both of us worked for a radio station in Limburger.
Yeah,
and you could lean back and there was a telex spitting out news items from het Algemeen Nederlands Persbureau, the Dutch news agency. You could just rip it off and say that's the news and then lean back. That's not what a journalist does.
Well, we didn't lean back actually because we had to, add the local news to this press agency stuff.
And you did not have at that time the social media, so you could not search on Facebook. That social media. But you take the opportunities.
Yeah, I do.
To move forward, and to let's say use possibly social media, but at least to harvest or to find the tiles and to find the tiles which you want to lift there.
Exactly.
Which is very new, but the way you sketch that, I can also imagine that what a journalist does is exactly what AI cannot do to find which tiles to lift. I mean, once you have lifted a tile, AI can do the routine job. So where is that novelty?
Yeah, that's true. So AI can help a journalist in different stages of his job, and it starts with research. So AI is very capable of looking through hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions of files and looking for things that are different than yesterday or are different from the rest, or so. That is lifting tiles in a way.
It's scanning over a lot of tiles. It's seeing the forest, but not finding the individual trees, the golden nuggets of...
Well, maybe you can, because if you see a pattern, and of course with the help of the journalist that is feeding the AI and receiving feedback from the AI in a back and forward way of working, this is really helpful for journalism. And this is only in the first stages of your work. So doing research, finding your ways, and maybe getting ideas in the first place. So what will I be writing about? What will it be reporting about? And finding these ideas is AI is helpful in that as well. Yeah.
I found it very intriguing and interesting direction, because while I was preparing for this story, I was thinking, well, maybe AI can do some fact checking, or once the journalist finds which style to lift, AI can polish that, can rewrite things, can translate things from Dutch into English.
Yeah.
But now you come with a somewhat different story where you believe, or you express that AI can really find or help in finding the right topics.
Yeah, and as I said, in different stages, because one thing, even when we were journalists in back in the day, there were companies releasing press releases, or government agencies releasing press releases, and you had to believe what was in the press release. What we do now with our tools, with Lio, what we do is feeding the press release to our AI, to Lio, and we get suggestions of deeper research, of nuanced stories, of sources. We get 20 different sources that are connected to this press release, which make it a better story, and maybe even a totally different story. So and that's a different stage than what I was just talking about, but it's very, very relevant and useful.
So when people say in future the whole internet will be one big reverberation room where AI repeats the fake news that is already there,
that's a risk. That is still a risk.
But you also have a different tone to that, saying that AI can help to.
Yeah. The last thing I want to state here is that AI is only helping us. Even with all the tools that are really helping journalism, you have to admit that AI is producing tons of fake news, and that is a risk for society, because people who are consuming the news can hardly tell the difference between real and unreal, and real and fake, and that is of course still the task of a journalist to make sense of it. But there's an abundance of information, and I think the percentage of trustful information is diminishing.
And now I would expect that someone who is a professor in Groningen on journalism would write papers expressing concerns and seeing where society goes, looking into that from a meta perspective, staying, what some people believe is an ivory tower in Groningen.
That's for my colleagues.
You're an innovator.
Yeah.
So you took up the challenge, and you create Lio, you create Podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's maybe, I cannot live without that. So that's maybe a story of my life, you could say. Even when I was young, I always tried to get somewhere where we weren't at that point. And at some point I fell for social media as a great help for journalism, when nobody in journalism thought that social media could be helpful. Well, now we're looking different towards social media, of course, but it pushed us to new boundaries, to new limits, and past them. With AI, it's somewhat the same. I think it is not very difficult to see the opportunities, and then there are two ways two approaches, you could say. One is, there are lots of risks, let's stay away, and that's what you see most legacy news companies are still doing at this point. Or you can say, that's interesting, I know we will be making mistakes, or we will fail at some point, but we'll get somewhere else where we are not now, where we aren't yet. So let's see. And that's how I look at it, and I don't claim that everything succeeded, but
maybe you could be a bit more specific about what you actually do right now, because there are many phases in that process of lifting the tiles and grabbing out the news and
Yeah.
bringing it as the highlights of the day.
Yeah.
And in all that process, you could pick and choose where you want to assist
Yeah.
the editor or assist
Yeah,
the journalist.
maybe take one step back. For now, a little bit more than 10 years, we have a small media company in Eindhoven, which is focusing on the world of technology and innovation. So we write we have an editorial staff of 6 or 7 people, some freelancers around them, and they produce stories every day, like 5 or 6 fresh stories on innovative processes, innovative developments. And at one point, one of my colleagues, my co-founder, Marien ten Houten, was like playing with the predecessor of ChatGPT. ChatGPT wasn't there yet, but well, there were movements at that point, and he built a tool for our newsroom that could help the newsroom produce better, more profound, better sourced stories. And that's what we call LIO Assistant. And LIO Assistant more or less guides the journalist through the process of reporting.
And this may be a field in innovation where there are many press releases, or where you find on LinkedIn that someone got a best paper award or an award on innovation. So there is already a kind of news topic.
Yeah.
You could read, copy and translate the press release.
Yeah.
You're done. You could also, let's say, as we do in scientific literature, have a reviewer or ask another expert opinion and then ask the tough questions about the truth of the technology. I still remember that once you said in Innovation Origins, the key thing is that you want to check the correctness, that you want to be correct in the technology.
Yeah, correct and understandable, because we want to reach a broader audience than just the scientific audience. Yeah.
And that's quite often the tension, to make it understandable.
Exactly.
But you want the insiders also to know
to be
that
happy. Yeah.
And where does your tool now fit best in that process?
I think you described it quite well, because it starts with the idea of the reporter. So it starts with a link or a research report or a study, and then our tool says, well, if you think this is important, then you should also look at this source and this source and this source. And then after you checked, well, it gives more or less 15 to 20 options, and you check like 4 or 5. And then the next phase in this process is the machine, LIO, asks you questions. If you think this is important, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it more or less, expands your vision. So you're taken out of the tunnel and back in the open field. And then, and then this last stage of this process, it helps you write the story itself.
Yeah, because you saw that I already wanted to immediately connect that to what people in the scientific world do, where whenever there is a paper coming in, there is a review process. And what you described there is check the existing literature, connect it, verify whether things are plausible or are in conflict with possible other stories. Yeah. That sounds very much like a review process.
Yeah, it could be. There is one thing that, well, it's not science. It's not scientific. It's scientifically based, I would say. It's not complete. It's not.
A human reviewer is also not complete.
No,
when I
true.
review something, I do not exhaustively know all the literature.
No.
So I can imagine that.
Yeah. It's really helpful, and there are similarities, certainly. But I wouldn't call this a scientific process. No.
That's going quite far. It's even, so we know that from the reviewing in scientific processes, patent searches are even more rigorous there. With journalism, I'm not sure whether we want to go there, but fact-checking, doing review, is possibly exactly what we do need in this world where there is so much fake news.
Yeah.
But can you rely on the news that is already in that big reverberation room?
Yeah. We think we found a formula that helps you and makes it reliable, the results. With Lio Assistant, as I explained the process, there's still a human watching over every step. We also have a different tool where the human is totally taken out of the process, and the machine uses the formula that you build in step one, and then goes ahead for as long as you want, and produces news stories every hour or every minute if you want. So
we come from the southern province of Limburg, where you have been editor-in-chief of the newspaper there, the Limburger. Now you work with a newspaper in Limburg, exactly on bringing the news to the internationals, to translate that into English. Is that an example of that second?
No, this is even a different one. So we have. There are 4 tools within the Lio toolkit. One is what I just explained, Lio Assistant. Then we have the most extreme version. That's what I said. The second is Lio Feed, and there are 2 in between. It's Lio Podcast and Lio Video, and Lio Podcast and Lio Video are I would almost say simpler tools because they use the URL of a story and we'll turn it into a different story shape, you could say. So it was an article on the internet, and it's turned over to a podcast or a video. So that is, and there are more tools like that. But we thought it was a good addition to the toolkit that we offer. Yeah. And for the Limburger, if you want to, I'm really proud because you said that I used to work for that newspaper, and I left there 20 years ago or so, and they asked us to make a daily podcast for the international audience in the city of Maastricht, growing audience of course, and for a Dutch language newspaper it's difficult to reach them. So they thought, maybe it's a good idea to give a daily overview of the most important local news stories in a podcast, and that's what we make for them.
But then you already have the backing from a professional newspaper.
Yeah.
With real flesh and blood journalists.
Exactly.
Good ones, because you have been there hiring.
They're still very good. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And then I can imagine that the translation is not just bluntly translating Dutch or the Limburg dialect into English. No. It is also getting that international flavor to it.
An international flavor and a flavor of a conversation, because 2 people are talking to each other, 2 AI people are talking with each other and having a real conversation about the news. So they are explaining what happened today to this international audience. And of course we choose the stories that are most welcome to them. So stories about university or maybe housing problems or things like that are really relevant to an international audience. But then it's the trick that we are good at, I would say, is translating that into a you could say real life credible story. Yeah.
Still, I like to challenge a bit. You took a conversation there. When we have a conversation, I have a role because I'm interested in what you are doing.
Yeah.
You explain your story about podcasts. But there is also, let's say, a little bit the suspicion that you just need 2 people to make it a bit more lively because the AI voices are boring. And do these 2 characters have a different role, or do you consciously put that into a conversation?
Yeah, we sometimes change the voices. We change, and we like to think that they have a personality.
Yeah.
And
personality in their intonation, or is there one of the cynical, skeptical guy, and the other one is more the positive techno?
Yeah, it's not that extreme because it is not techno news, of course, but it is it's one has the role of the skeptic, asking questions. Is this really true? Are you sure? And the other is explaining, well, of course, I just told you so, because I know, and our newsroom found this out, and so it's really a conversation like two people could have. Yeah.
You also mentioned the word, this is what we are good at. What is always a difficulty in the field of innovation is if this really becomes booming and one of the big tech guys steps in, you're gone out of business. So are there certain things, well, probably not patterns, but something in how you train your models or how you present the news that is a unique point that creates a future for your business?
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's a real a worry. That's a big word, because we always find new things and new ways and new initiatives. But if you see what we are capable of with a very small team, then you can imagine what a team with more than 10,000 employees can be capable of. So that we will be there will be competition from very big players. There is competition. There are two things I think that help us. One is we are one of the few that combine AI tools with journalism. So we have a journalistic soul, and we're proud of that, and we can always proudly tell, and for me as a professor in journalism, I cannot, I cannot do otherwise, but as an organization also. So we look at it from a journalistic perspective. That's one thing to distinguish ourselves from a purely tech company, I would say. And then there's another thing, is that we are working quite hard on doing this 100% locally. We are very dependent on American or Chinese players at this moment. We still are at this moment, but we are looking at ways to do everything that we produce within the Netherlands even. So not only European, but in our own country. And that is, I think, something that is that will be helpful in the next weeks, months, years. Yeah.
And the people in your team are also journalists? You hire the people who have the same background? Or I can imagine, let's say, training new models, doing exactly the things that you want to do with that journalistic flavor, may also require huge data processing capabilities. Train your own models. That could be a new direction, or is it already something that you?
Yeah, my co-founder is the tech guy. So he is Marien ten Houten. He is always working on he is the nerd and always thinking of new things and new ways and also in contact with teams and with organizations that are helpful there. So yes, that is a main focus also within the company. But still, we like to shout it out that we are a journalism company, helped by tech.
Yeah. And that's also on how we see your company develop and your directions develop. That also brings me a bit to your view on what is happening in the world in terms of journalism. It's a hot topic in the Dutch news.
Yeah.
If I compare, let's say, the British way of organizing public broadcasting, the BBC, it's a bit from the model of there is a truth.
Mm-hmm.
In Holland we are used to the zuilen, the
columns.
I wanted almost to say the pillars, as that is bearing the society, but you call it. We see that let's say in politics there's a bit of pushback towards different columns of news, which to me sounds a bit like there should always be a bit of a flavor, even in the news. Mm-hmm. Or would you say, I can imagine that striving for one large organization that does everything in terms of the news. What is your opinion as maybe as a professor or as someone who is in the supervisory board of the NOS?
You know, I think it's important to have all these different views, these different flavors. I think I'm not worried about losing them, because not only because within the public broadcasting system there will be different flavors, but the public broadcasting system is not the end of it. So there's more. There are newspapers, there are online platforms, there are commercial broadcasters. So there will be different flavors. But there's one thing, and that is, you're mentioning the NOS. NOS is there to give the foundation of news. And for the NOS, it's truly important not to have a flavor. And that's the exception, I would say. So everybody should trust what the NOS is publishing, and hopefully use it as well, maybe the common ground of information.
Now, I'm sorry for picking you on one word. The NOS is the exception. Can I conclude from that the mainstream and the main bulk of the activities is different from that?
I would say so, because if you look at the Dutch media landscape, then, well, there is obviously a big difference between the Volkskrant and Telegraaf. Both professional news organizations, but their products are quite different. And I'll say, again, totally different. Also within the broadcasting system, there are, if you have the news from KRO and NCRV, it's different than from Poont, to just name two. And that's a good thing. But underneath or on top of that, no matter how you look at it, but there needs to be something that is without a flavor, I would say, and that's the NOS.
And how will AI start to influence that? How is, let's say, the activities, like you're exploring them right now, influencing potentially that landscape in future?
Yeah, of course. At least I hope so, because there are many good things that can come from it. And I think most of the news organizations, the big news organizations in the Netherlands now are somewhat reluctant in this sense. I understand that, but I don't think it's helping them. So what you see here and there is that behind the scenes they are experimenting, but still. Almost all of them say, dear audience, you can trust us, this is a human job, and we will keep it human, so AI is not visible in our content. And that is, I think, too black and white. Yeah.
Professor Bart Brouwers, professor in Groningen, heavily involved in the Dutch media landscape, a journalist by experience. Maybe one final thing then, because your background is in history. Do you need to study journalism to become a good journalist?
Well, it's a free profession, so everybody can call themselves a journalist. So there is no legal need to study journalism. But as a professor in journalism, I would certainly advise everybody who has ambition to be a journalist to do a regular and a thorough education in journalism.
If you could turn back time?
I wouldn't. I love my history education, and I still enjoy reading historical works, and so I wouldn't change it.
Thank you very much, Professor Brouwers.
Thank you.
Design, lifestyle, technology and innovation. More on podcasts for Brainport.